A federal appeals court is now weighing the release of former President Trump's documents related to January 6th. Mr. Trump wants the records blocked from the congressional investigation into the deadly attack on the Capitol. And in a sudden reversal, his former chief of staff is now choosing to cooperate with the probe. Our Kris Van Cleave has the latest from Capitol Hill.
A showdown in the courtroom today as lawyers for the former president tried to stop the release of his call records and handwritten notes from January 6th. The judges sounded skeptical of the president's claim of executive privilege.
This all boils down to who decides. Why should the former president be the one to make that determination?
The Trump legal team suggested each document could be reviewed individually. The judges were not moved.
Please stop. Please stop.
What we have seen from the former occupant of the White House time and time again is the delay.
January 6th committee member California Congressman Pete Aguilar said the documents could shed light on new reports. Mr. Trump spent the hours before the Capitol attack working the phones, talking to advisors about ways to stop the certification of President Biden's election.
This was a key focus on the president's mind at the time, and he was working with his team in order to try to thwart the certification of those ballots.
Former Trump White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows agreed today to cooperate with the committee after snubbing the panel for months.
No one in the West Wing had any knowledge that anything like what happened on January 6th was going to happen.
His change of heart comes after former Trump advisor Steve Bannon was charged with criminal contempt for refusing to cooperate.
And Kris Van Cleave's working the late shift joins us now from the Capitol with more. Kris, good to see you. How soon do we know how soon the appeals court could rule on the fate of the former president's records?
Well, Ed, great to be with you. You're doing a great job tonight. They heard oral arguments today. They need some time to process that write-up in opinion. But the appeals court does seem to want to move relatively quickly here. But I don't know that we have a definitive date when we're going to go on to ruling watch. But likely sooner than later. The justices seemed well aware that time was a key part of the argument on both sides.
And now that Mark Meadows is cooperating with the January 6th committee, what exactly are they hoping to learn from him?
Well, I think the committee has a lot of questions about the time between the election in November and January 6th, what sort of things were going on inside the White House on January 6th, as well as his communications with the president, other government officials, and people outside of the government. Now unclear if Mr. Meadows is going to answer all of those. Of course, the former president has declared executive privilege and has encouraged his former staff not to cooperate. And, the committee does have a grain of sand here. He's agreed to sit for an initial deposition and hand over documents. But the chairman of the January 6th committee said in a statement today that the committee will continue to assess Meadows' degree of compliance with our subpoena after the deposition. So, there does sound like there's a little bit of skepticism here, but, it does also appear to be at least a measurable step forward in that conversation. They've been saying for some time that Meadows had been interacting with the committee, but obviously he had not shown up for a deposition previously.
And, of course, he's a former White House chief of staff. He's also a former member of Congress who served alongside many of the people who will be questioning him, or at least who sit on that committee. So that's quite a thing to remember that makes this all the more amazing, really, frankly, and unprecedented. The committee is also expected to consider holding a second Trump ally in contempt of Congress. Tell us more about Jeffrey Clark and what we can expect on Wednesday.
Sure. So Jeffrey Clark is a former Department of Justice official during the Trump administration era who has been linked to spreading some of the baseless claims of election fraud. He has not cooperated with the committee. He did come in for a deposition where he refused to answer any questions, claimed attorney-client privilege and executive privilege. So the committee is now moving to consider whether or not to ask the entire House to vote on a contempt resolution. We know from speaking with Congressman Aguilar, he's a yes vote on contempt. So it certainly feels like this may be the second Trump-era official that could go before a House vote for contempt. That hearing is tomorrow evening, so we'll know a lot more. Already the House is making preparations to potentially vote on that this week.
And there are dozens of other Trump administration officials who are in the mix here, let's put it that way. What is their status? Do we know whether any of the others may end up in a similar situation for Mr. Clark?
Well, there are a bunch of depositions scheduled for this week. The ones, 3 of them, yesterday and today, have all been postponed. The committee told us, said that they're interacting with the people involved and that they've agreed to a short delay. Wouldn't comment on the rest of the week, but there certainly are more planned. Open question if they get delayed or if in fact we have some no-shows. But the committee says they have talked to more than 200 people, so they are making progress. They are doing work behind closed doors, but getting Trump-era officials to sit for a deposition has been a real struggle.
I know we learned today that the Georgia Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, who of course was a key figure in the post-election era, was also there today testifying or meeting with the committee to talk about that period. So it gives you a sense, 200 people, that's a significant number. And what's also notable now, as you're pointing out, they're getting some cooperation. These are lesser known, less famous figures in the Trump orbit than, say, Roger Stone or Steve Bannon. But the fact that all of these are now beginning to cooperate is a sign, at least, that they may be getting a little more cooperation. Before we let you go, there is, of course, a day job that the Congress has to do. And one of those elements of it is, of course, passing a president's agenda. In this case, the Build Back Better plan. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says he wants to get the social spending bill passed before Christmas. But, of course, if you've been paying any attention over the course of this year, you know that there are at least 2 senators, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, whose support is needed. Do we know where they are on all this? And is Christmas a realistic deadline?
Well, Senator Schumer's to-do list is daunting. You have the president's social spending plan. They have to fund the government, or the government shuts down by Friday. You have the debt ceiling that has to be raised perhaps by the middle of December. And the thing that was supposed to be easy was passing the defense spending bill that's a must-pass that passes every year. But Republicans are currently filibustering that. So is Christmas reasonable? I mean, anything is possible, but there's a lot to get done between now and then. Senator Manchin continues to express skepticism about, he has talked for months about a strategic pause, but he has also hinted that, maybe he'd be open to a December timeline. He has some specific issues with things inside the bill that the House passed, so there would need to be changes. Senator Schumer said he'd like it on the floor by the week of the 13th, I believe. And Senator Sinema tends to not say a whole lot, so is keeping her cards close to the vest. She likes to position herself as a deal maker, so it's possible that she is interfacing on things like the state and local tax deduction, where there are differences in opinion between the Senate and the House, as well as the paid family leave, which is likely to come out. We're waiting to hear from the parliamentarian on things like immigration reform. So a lot of stuff in the air. Could they make Christmas? A number of the senators are preparing to work nights and weekends between now and then. Senator Leahy said they're putting up the Christmas tree in their D.C. home, not their Vermont home.
Yeah. When you cover Congress, you don't make firm plans with friends and family this time of year, do you?
Or really any time of year.
Fair enough. Kris Van Cleave, who covers Congress for CBS, we thank you.
Sure thing.